Okay, here we go. I think it's all good. Well, hello. Thank you for having me today to speak about this subject. Today I'd like to talk to you, well, as the title suggests, about the developer experience, about the onboarding, and about an experience I think we've all had before, whether we were developers or not, when we were onboarded into a team. And we're going to talk about the first days, the first weeks, the first months that we spent in a new team, when we joined a new team, and the early moments where a lot of things can change, a lot of things can play a big role in what's going to come in the following years, the following months that we spend in that team. I've noticed we talk a lot about productivity, about flow, about recruitment, about performance, about team design. But I started to wonder, do we talk about enough how it starts? How do we come into a team so that we talk about the team design and how it comes together? And do we actually give new people who join a new team a chance to succeed and chance to prove themselves and to be productive and be part of the team? So, like I said, we're going to talk about the starting point. And I think if we mess that up, none of the rest matters really, and we don't get flow, we don't get performance, and we get frustrated as a developer. We get disconnected teams, we get a whole lot of silence, and to explore that, we're going to explore the story of Hugo, a developer who joined his new team. But before we dive into Hugo's story, I'm going to introduce myself. So I'm Hafsa, a software engineer and agile facilitator. But more importantly, I like to think of myself as a survivor and observer of multiple onboarding experiences that were less than ideal. And I've seen the good, the bad, sometimes the chaotic, and that's exactly why I'm passionate about what makes a team truly thrive, not just at the individual level, but also as a team, as a whole. And I'm joining you today from Rennes, from France, where I currently work as a developer and a Scrum Master for a company named Hugo. And wearing both hats as a developer, as a Scrum Master, I've had the opportunity to observe, and I've realized that onboarding isn't just a checklist, which is just someone joining a team and we give a bunch of documents to fill and that's it, but it's a critical human experience. It's about getting someone started into a team and helping them truly belong on the long run. So when we go beyond the formalities of what onboarding is, it becomes something much more meaningful. It's about creating the right conditions for someone to integrate into a team, to understand the company cultures and values, to learn how to use the tools without friction, to meet the right people who are going to support them, help them, unblock them, inspire them. And eventually, it's about helping someone become more effective sustainably. And when it's done right, the person, they feel like they belong, and they're more confident, they're more engaged, they feel part of something, they're naturally more productive. But when onboarding goes wrong, people feel lost, disconnected, unsure of what their value, what they bring to the team, and they may quietly disengage, and sometimes never making it past the first few months into the team. So to really understand the impact of poor onboarding, we're going to get to Hugo's story, like I said. It's a kind of special mini-series, like something you might binge watch on Netflix, and it's called Lost in Onboarding, and it's a series inspired by true events, some of which I've lived myself or I've seen around me. So it's a story of a new developer, Hugo, like I said, who arrives at a company, is given one mission to successfully integrate, and it says, a dev joining a new team is like a computer without updates, slow, unstable, and seconds away from crashing. Follow Hugo on his race to integrate or self-destruct trying. So I now invite you to watch a few clips together. So in this series, every day is an episode, and every season is a month. So let's experience Hugo's story like if it were our own. But to begin, I'm going to show you a key moment, the final episode of the series. If you're like me and sometimes like to know the end before we even start watching the series, I like to do that. So here it is, season 3, episode 22, Game Over. You guessed it, spoiler alert, our hero leaves, but he doesn't leave as a hero. He leaves because he didn't make it past his probation period. And to understand why, we need to go back to the very beginning of his story and take a look at what happened to him. So we're going to take a look at 6 key moments in the first month of his onboarding, starting with day 1, when Hugo arrives at his new mission, motivated, ready to prove himself. When he arrived, he was faced with an empty office. He had to wait alone for quite a moment. He started to wonder, did someone forget I was starting today? Did I get the address wrong? But no, it just turns out that the team is pretty flexible on the starting time, but no one thought to tell him that they were flexible. So he's already confused and the day hasn't even begun. So thankfully for him, the team arrived, fast forward. His team arrived, eventually he took a moment to grab a coffee together, to introduce the whole team, introduce himself. He then had a general introduction to the project, the functional context, the why, and then he gets his laptop, shiny, new, full of promise, but with no access, no credentials, no permissions, no idea on who to contact. I think it sounds familiar. I think we've all had this. Sometimes it lasts weeks, sometimes it lasts more. And that was really Hugo's first challenge in his onboarding. In this case, he had no access at all, but sometimes we have, sometimes very often as well, we don't have the workstation, the hardware, or the access, and nothing is ready on the first day. And honestly, the solution is quite simple, is to prepare the access to the tools, the work environment in advance, reach out to whoever in charge. Sometimes, usually it's someone outside the team, maybe the IT department, create that ticket, have access and tooling ready to go, so when the dev arrives, he has all the tools to start. It saves time, it saves frustration to everyone, for everyone. So let's just say that everything got ready for him. The laptop arrived, the permissions are set. He then gets given the documentation. That kind of say, well, this is how you set up your laptop, just follow this guide. Except it was long, it was scattered in different spaces, it was outdated. Half of it doesn't apply anymore, and the person who last updated it left like 6 months ago. Quickly, the frustration grew, because he felt like he wasn't getting anywhere. He spent all his time just trying to figure out what's still relevant, which is the last information, what's missing, what's the order to even read the documentation. And let's be honest, who wouldn't be when handed the documentation scattered in different repos between GitLab, Notion, Google Drive, and any other space, and no information or who to contact or what to look at. So the pitfall here is something we've all faced before. Incomplete, poor organized, missing documentation. And documentation often gets overlooked in onboarding because we think, well, it gets all dumped in one messy place and then it's given to the person who's onboarded. And a lot of things, a lot of teams, they think they've documented everything, but they actually never watched someone use that documentation for the first time. So they don't really know. And the truth is, the right documentation can save hours of confusion, reduce the need for repeated explanation, reduce cognitive load, frustration, build confidence, and autonomy early on. And so the solution would be to prepare onboarding documentation, as I like to call it, before the dev arrives. So I like to think of onboarding documentation as a puzzle. Every piece, we don't have to have every piece on the day one, but the more you can have, the clearer the picture becomes, starting with an org chart. It's not about hierarchy, but it's about knowing who to contact and who to talk to about different subjects. A glossary, especially in domain-heavy environments, acronyms, internal terms we use, business logic. It can help us find the information faster without maybe having to ask questions or go through different people. Guides and manuals. They don't have to be perfect, but anything that can help us maybe just set up our computer, coding conventions, anything that we can document, that we can go back and look at. It's also important to add here when setting up a laptop, there's a whole technical aspect of it that we can go into that I actually don't have time to go into, but anything like a script to set up an environment, a working environment, anything with Docker and etc. So this is something that we can do as a team to make anything, if we can automate anything to save time and frustration, I think that's worth saying, it has to be said. Architecture diagrams, even just a simple one that can help the developer have a general overview of the project. how the components interact with each other, etc. And finally, a team photo directory. It might sound simple, but it's powerful, knowing who's who to talk to, especially when we're in remote or hybrid communication ways. So it's nice to have photo directory to know who we're talking to. So when these puzzle pieces are available, onboarding, it becomes less about guesswork, and then we understand the information that we're going for. It helps people connect the dots faster. It saves, like I said, it saves time, cognitive load, and any frustration that can come with trying to guess, or as I like to call it, maybe detective work that we do on the first trace, trying to find the information from different areas or different people. So if we talk about the onboarding plan itself, I tried to work on a sort of onboarding plan to try to have a clear way, a clear program on how to go on onboarding. So a common mistake is thinking that onboarding starts on day one as person who arrives. But I think we've seen so far, as I said it, that it starts before. It starts since the recruitment. I think we go into a phase of preparation. We prepare for the arrival of the person. So we prepare the access and the tools, like I said. We prepare the documentation. We create a personalized onboarding plan. It depends on the seniority of the person, depends on the requirements for the job. Update the skills matrix. It helps us assess what we need as skills for this job, but also what the person can be trained for, what the person has that can be a plus for the team, or that can help us navigate how they can help us as a team. Then, like we've seen before, start a date, choose a start time that suits everyone so that we don't fall into the trap of we weren't expecting you until 11, or maybe worse, we didn't know that you were coming today, or any other situation that we can fall into. And it creates this very good first impression because we were here, we were prepared for you, and we welcome you. The first day, it's better to prefer in-person welcomes, especially when we work in hybrid and remote, like I said, preparing for the arrival of the person. Take time to introduce the team and the culture and the functional context of the project. Not just anything that was listed in the, not just the tech stack. Present the tools used for the role in real work, because there's sometimes a difference between what we listed in the job description and what we require in day-to-day life. And of course, share the documentation that we mentioned before. I noticed the little tag I added ideally since the interviews, because I think a lot of this context and tools should be shared during the interviews, also because the candidate needs to know what to expect, but also before, so that we create a connection with the new hire before they even come. They know what the job requirements are. And the smoother we make, I think, this first early path, the faster people go from newcomers to actual team members since day one. So let's jump to the next scene. A week goes by. Hugo's laptop is finally ready. At last, his first task arrived. And then his first reaction is, well, actually, I don't think I'm ready to start on my first task. Because remember, he does have a functional, he did have a functional introduction to the project. He had the documentation. But when it comes to concrete details, he didn't get an introduction or any presentation on what's what and what is how the pieces fit together. So because, like I said, he didn't get any presentation of the architecture, the technical aspects, they relied only on the documentation. The solution is quite simple. It's to give a technical introduction, project architecture, coding conventions, team practices, any information that can help the new developer. He's going to have an opportunity to work on it in practice later, but it's important to take time to present it and discuss it early on. This is very important to prevent any confusions or any mistakes on the long run. So eventually, Hugo does feel ready to tackle his task. Turns out, maybe, you guessed it, once he started coding, it was a bit more complicated than he expected. The code base was quite complex, and he wondered, like, what did I get myself into? So he asked for help, which is good. He asked the first person, who said, well, kind of don't know, maybe you should ask another one. He asked another person, they said they were busy or going into a meeting, so didn't have time to help. Eventually, as with anyone in his space, he felt quite alone, discouraged. He feels himself drifting, he feels himself isolated, he doesn't dare to ask questions anymore, and he ends up in his corner, alone, isolated, working on his task. And to put it simply, he lacked support. Not necessarily because the team didn't want to help. Maybe they had priorities, maybe they have critical tasks, maybe they have meetings. But the solution would be to assign a mentor or buddy, as some like to call it, to accompany or to help the new dev. And the mentor is much more just a technical guide. It's not the tech lead, it's not the CTO sometimes. It's not the person who knows the project necessarily. But the role, I think, is very based on human qualities. It's someone who's going to welcome the newcomer, someone who's going to transmit the team's culture and practices, someone who's going to guide them through the architecture and tools, someone who's going to support them when they're blocked, and most importantly, I think someone who's going to help them become autonomous as time goes by. So in short, I think a good mentor isn't just to answer questions. They lay the foundation for long-term success. And this is important just not for the new developer only, but I think for the whole team. Because when we assign a mentor, we're not just assigning supporting onboarding, but we're also protecting the team's flow, I think. Because we know that this person is in charge of onboarding the new person, of supporting them. So we don't give them any critical task, we don't give them any important subject to work on. So that allows the team to continue working on important subjects, on priorities and any urgencies. And we know that the person onboarded has the support they need to be onboarded and to learn more about the project. So being a good mentor, like I said, isn't just about knowing the technical aspects of the project, it's about human qualities. So qualities like being a good teacher, being available, being empathetic, being open-minded, being encouraging, being inspiring. It's also, I think, something very important, someone who knows, who is aware of psychological safety. I think it's very important. And one thing I want to make very clear, which is something very important for me to mention, is that mentoring isn't knowledge transfer. Sometimes the person someone being replaced is the person who is assigned to support the person coming, who is assigned to accompany them. I think it's not a very good idea because it happens to me both as someone being replaced as someone replacing. And it's not very efficient. It creates a lot of frustration. Because it creates pressure and confusion on both sides, because the person who's just arrived, they inherit maybe undocumented habits, maybe tasks that weren't completed, maybe zero context, and the person leaving, they just want to close things off and just leave. So maybe they don't have the bandwidth or they didn't have the patience to accompany a person come in. And I think the mentor should be someone who's staying, someone who's going to be there, who's available, who's trusted by the team to accompany, not just answer questions, but to build confidence, to build autonomy, like I said, and to be there for the long run. So assigning a mentor, like I said, is done before in the phase of preparation. And then the introductions, I think, should be done since first day one, so that we create the connection with the person who is arriving. So unfortunately for Hugo, he didn't have a mentor, he didn't have a buddy. So for an entire week, he moves forward alone with no real direction, not knowing if he's doing well or not. 3 weeks after joining, he finally breaks. He just tells the team, I'm struggling, I'm not getting anywhere. And he admits finally that he's stuck. But there was more to the situation than the lack of support. I think the mistake his team did, as well as not giving him support, is assigning him a task that was too complex for his knowledge level in the team. So one of the common mistakes that we make is that we assign tasks that are too complex, especially in tech teams, because we think that's what's going to allow the person to learn faster about the project. Or sometimes when it's a senior dev, we think, well, they're going to know what they're doing, so we're just going to give them a very complex task, and they're going to get through it. But what actually happens is that they spend hours trying not to mess things up. They second-guess every decision. They're afraid to ask questions. And I think instead we should start with simple tasks and provide supports to complete them. Just start with simple, well-scoped tasks. I think some projects, they start with maybe just a typo on the website. Maybe you can correct this typo. And it just helps us have an overview of how the flow goes. Maybe from assigning the ticket to the deployment, etc. We get to have an idea of how things go. And it builds confidence to have your first task go into production. And you know that you contributed to what is now in production. And the support could be having mentors and also maybe pair, mob or ensemble programming. I think having both can help understand more about the project, getting the support needed, working together as a team, getting to know each other, how we work, having discussions maybe on practices, coding conventions, and anything related to the project. So how does a solid first week look like? We continue to prefer in-person presence, technical training, present ongoing topics so that we know what we're doing, what the team is doing. Present recurrent meetings and rituals because, well, we're going to invite the dev to these meetings, so might as well explain why they're invited. Assign simple tasks, like I said, with gradually increasing the complexity and expanding the scope, and continuing the support from the mentor. Well, a month later, Hugo finally gathers the courage to ask for feedback, which is good. But by then, I think it was already too late. And the only response he gets is, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I think we've all heard that before. It's not great feedback, is it? And rightfully so. He wasn't very happy with this. He wasn't very satisfied. He was like, well, thanks, but I don't know what to do with this feedback. So he never really knew if he was going in the right direction or what he could improve. That, I think, contributed in his feeling of isolation and not being supported. And worse, I think he never got a chance to experience how he felt about his onboarding experience, how he felt about how it went. When there's no feedback in either direction, we lose clarity, we miss out on so many opportunities to improve either our processes or how team is doing. I think the solution is to build a culture of regular, constructive, and two-way feedback. And I think it shouldn't have been on Hugo to ask for feedback, which is good, but I think he should be given feedback naturally and regularly since he started, and he should have a space to explain how he felt about his onboarding. And I think there's one simple tool for this is, we call it in France, rapport d'étonnement. It's a first impressions report. I think that's the closest translation I found. And it's a simple but powerful tool, I think. It's an opportunity for the new dev, the person who just arrived, to share any surprises, any confusion, any successes, any questions they have about the project. And the key is to capture a fresh perspective, because it's not every day that we get someone arriving for the first time to our team. And I like to think of it as a double gift for the person who just arrived, like I said, to express their surprises, their confusions, their questions. But I think for the team and the company, it's also a gift. It's a rare opportunity to know what's working and what's not. Because like I said, it's not every day that we get a new, fresh perspective on our ways. And we get to know what we can do better in documentation, unclear processes, and maybe even cultural disconnects. And more importantly, I think it's intentional exchange. It should be structured, it should be intentional. It shouldn't be done maybe meeting like over coffee in the morning and we say, well, so how do you feel about your onboarding? I think we should take the time to discuss, and it should be structured, it should be, maybe it should be written so that we can have something to look back on and see how we improve our processes. And I think without this, the risk is that we fall into tunnel vision. The dev arrives, they're assigned new tasks, they start working, they don't get any context, they get busy, they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They seem productive, but they're disconnected, they're isolated, they lose meaning, and they're just disengaged overall, and they end up leaving in maybe less than a year. So how to use the first impressions report? I think the best way is to add it on the first week. Some teams also have a moment to discuss informally on the first day how the first day went. First week, it gives us enough time to know, to have an idea how things were. Discuss it as a team, not in silence. Show that the feedback leads to actual improvement and actual actions. It's like retrospective. If we don't have actions after retrospective, it's not really worth doing because we don't create improvement. And take the time to discuss everything, not from the technical aspect, but also from the processes, documentation, everything that goes into the onboarding. And like I said, it should be a two-way dialogue. How did you feel about your onboarding? But also we give you the feedback on how we think you did on your first week, first month, or first 3 months. So eventually we expand, like I said, the scope of the tasks. We add more complexity for the first month. We continue doing essentially what we did on the first week: support, training, updating the skills metrics, the first impressions report, and then we move on to more complex tasks. Notice I presented it in 3 months. That's because it's usually, I think, the period for the probation period, so it allows us to know if the dev, well, it allows them to know if they want to continue with us, but also do we think they're the right fit for the team. But also because I found an interesting statistic that says that 1 in every 3 new hires, they leave a job in 3 months. So I think it's an important period. I think we can do a lot in 3 months, usually, if we prioritize onboarding and we put effort into it. So if you were to summarize the onboarding, I think everything starts with the welcome. A person who is well welcomed, they feel trusted, they have trust into the team. And I think everything becomes harder if we don't have trust. We lose meaning, we lose any engagement to any motivation. And then comes the growth, the path to autonomy. So we support the dev during their onboarding, during the time they come. It doesn't happen on its own, like I said, support intentional investment. And then we integrate faster into the team's flow. The dev, they deliver value sooner with more confidence. In the long run, you get a sustainable performance and eventually long-term retention. And I think a dev who is well integrated will understand the tools, they understand what they're doing, the team's convention, the practices, etc. They make less mistakes on the long run because we took the time to really work on this together. They need less supervision on the long run as well. They're more independent. And we get less turnover, less rework. We get better quality in our projects, our code. And when you think about how expensive hiring is, which I don't have numbers, I'm not really involved in the whole thing, but I think it's quite expensive to hire a new developer and then have him or her spend 3 months and then leave and then have to do it all over again. I think it's it's a direct loss for the company and also for the team. And try to build this confidence and this trust with the new hire. So I don't think of onboarding as a bonus. I think it's an important subject to discuss. This is why I'm here to talk about it today. I think it's strategic investment for the team and also for companies in performance, in retention, in building teams and collective success. So yes, one does not simply welcome a new hire without an onboarding process. If I was going to leave you with something, this is it. I think every person we hire is an opportunity. Every first day holds a promise to the dev and also to the team. And I think it's up to us as teams. Notice I talked about teams, I didn't talk about the company, I didn't talk about HR, about managers. I think it's really about teams, and we are people who welcome a new hire into our little tribe. I'm going to leave you with some statistics if you like to know a bit about numbers. There's 2 very interesting articles, Employee Onboarding Statistics 2025 and 25 Surprising Employee Onboarding Statistics in 2025. According to Gallup's most recent reporting on onboarding statistics, only 12% of all employees think that their companies have done a great job onboarding, which is very low. And poor onboarding experiences is one of the top 3 reasons why people leave their job in the first 3 months. Also with misalignment between job expectations and reality. It's not surprising. And lack of connection with team culture and company culture, which is something I hope I maybe tackled into the planning, the onboarding plan. Notice it is very general, so it's really to customize according to your teams, but I try to give the overall idea. I've also used a couple of tools to create this presentation. I will leave you with a QR code, which is it's feedback. I asked 3 simple questions. I would like to have the answer for them, if it's possible, to help me improve this presentation. And then you get the slides at the end of the form. I've also added my QR code if you want to keep in touch or you have any questions, because I don't think we have time to have any questions or remarks right now. And thank you for having me again, and thank you for your attention.